Hi, folks. Welcome again to History Matters and So Does Coffee, substitute episode number 3, the last one that Matt and I are pre-recording in advance of my returning from vacation. And Newbie is showing you his butt. I don't know why. Thanks, Newbie. At any rate, what I have mentioned in previous episodes is I didn't want, after all of the weeks, many weeks we've done this consecutively, not missing one. I did not want to miss any when I went on vacation, even though, Matt, you were like, you deserve a day off. I was like, I'll have some days off, but this way, we won't miss a week. I decided that we would have brief episodes. We've done 2 so far. This is the 3rd, in which I thought, there are common questions that could be applied to many things, the W questions, who, what, why, where, when. And then I would use some of those Ws as a starting point to talk about questions historians ask, or evidence that they use, or insights that you can get thinking about that question, thinking about a way in which you're asking it. And as always, helping you not just to understand history, but also the ways that it helps us to think about the present. And I keep stopping this is the 3rd time, and I still want to stop because I keep wanting to say, and now I turn to my partner in crime, Matt, who will explain the rules.
The rules of the game are...
There's a game there, but there are no rules, no. But certainly we hope, although we cannot follow along and see where you're from and say good morning, I hope at least you're chatting to each other since this is such a great community. But okay, let me approach the topic that I want to talk about today, which is really timely, and is one that I end up talking about a lot in my classes. So I teach a class called The Age of Hamilton and Jefferson. What it's really about is the Revolutionary and early national periods in a general kind of a way. We talk about nationalism and the revolution and national character and race and slavery and any number of other things. And we use the letters of Jefferson and Hamilton as the main sources. We read a biography of each one of those guys the first 2 weeks. And after that, the whole rest of the semester is primary sources from the Library of America Jefferson edition and the Library of America Hamilton edition. And I've just gone through those big volumes and I broke things up into topics. So Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton are at the center of this, but they're not the point. The point is larger issues. But they're both obviously politicians. They write a lot of political letters as well as personal letters. The students over the course of the semester read a lot of political letters, some of them written between Hamilton and Jefferson and a friend, some of them written to people that it's unclear what the relationship, or at least to the students, is. And when I get asked, so I've been teaching this course, I guess once a year, pretty much every year except for the years I've been on leave, throughout the time that I was at Yale, and even once when I was a grad student at UVA. So, we're talking, 25, 26, I taught it a lot of times. And what I get asked, I'm guessing almost every time I teach the course, is what I want to talk about today. It's the W that I want to talk about today. And that is why. Because very often after reading a certain amount of political correspondence, a student will ask a really logical question. How can I tell if he's telling the truth or trying to tell the truth? Like, why isn't this just a bunch of political hooey? Like, how can we tell he's sincere? This is a politician talking to someone, and he's going to be like scoring points and whatever it is he's doing. Politicians don't tell the truth, do they? And if they do, how can you tell when they are? Now, that's a logical question. It's a smart question. It's an interesting question to try and answer because on the one hand, not just politicians, but anybody, how do you tell that what they're saying, that they think it's true, or they're aiming for the truth, or they're really trying to be manipulative in some way? It's not always easy to tell. In my classes, I suggest a bunch of things to students that they should think about in trying to figure out if a letter is being sneaky or being sincere. And some of the things I tell them to think about are obvious. So for example, think about the relationship between the person writing and the person receiving the letter. In the case of Jefferson, if he's writing to James Madison, it's pretty reliable. He doesn't tend to lie. To his close buddy, he pretty much tends to be pretty sincere. So that's a good giveaway. Hamilton's a little bit more difficult, but still, there are a handful of friends like James McHenry, who he writes to, and he tends to be pretty obvious. You can't assume that with Washington because Hamilton might have things he wants Washington to do or think. But at any rate, think about the personal relationship between the two people writing, because that will help you know whether it's hard to imagine these people lying to each other or easy to imagine them lying to each other. I tell the students to think about what just happened before the person sat down to write the letter. So is there something in the background that is influencing this letter that might not be on the page, but that's going to give you a clue as to the real meaning behind the letter? I ask people to think about how a letter was sent. And in the time period that I write about, the late 18th and even the early 19th century, letters go from writer to recipient in a variety of different ways, and how they go matters. So if something is dropped into the mail, that's not a very safe way to send anything of value, any news of value, anything of value. News bags get robbed, news gets lost, people steal or rummage through the mail. So if something's dropped in the mail, and it's usually at the beginning of a letter. When you look at letters from the 18th century, very often at the beginning, it will say something like, I send this to you by blah, blah, or I must stop now, the post is coming, whatever. There'll be a clue at the beginning or end of the letter as to how it's being sent. If it's just being dropped in the mail, I start out by thinking, probably not really valuable news here, because if there were, then this person would have given it to one person to hand to another person. And that's more often what you'll see is a letter will say, I send this to you by Mr. Smith, which means the letter was given to Mr. Smith, and Mr. Smith in person delivered it to this other person. So figuring out how a letter is being transmitted gives you, again, a sense of the relationship between the people and how important the evidence is in that letter. There are all kinds of ways in which you can ask these kinds of questions, and put yourself in the moment of the letter writing, right? In a certain place, at a certain moment, to a certain person, with a certain motive. If you look hard enough, you can figure out at least some of that and begin to judge the likelihood that what you're seeing in a letter is meant to be sincere, or is really meant to be sneaky or manipulative, or is there for some really explicit purpose. Now, I'm using kind of amorphous words because the fact of the matter is there's no clear line in the sand, right? Even looking at historic evidence, sometimes I suppose you can look at something and say, well, yeah, that seems pretty blunt and factual and truthful. And you can look at something else and say, yeah, no, there's no way that's real. But there's a lot of stuff that it's true, but is the tone true, or did the person not know about this other thing? I don't know. There's a lot of interpretation involved, particularly when using correspondence, which I adore. Right? This is one of the things I love, is to rummage through personal correspondence and pull at the threads to see what they reveal about the people and the politics that isn't obvious because it's not in the words, but it's between the words, or it's on the paper. So all of that is an important part of being a historian. But what this also suggests, and I think it suggests this, to the students over the years, I think I worked my way into this second lesson from doing this. What it teaches the students is you got to think about things that are being said in a political context, right? I mean, you can't take something from a political figure being sent to someone at its word. You have to think about it. You have to think about why it's being sent and what the goal is, and is there something the person wants from the other person? So that even though the students are basically saying, like, how can I tell if this is real or if this is some manipulative thing? I suppose the most honest answer is you can't absolutely tell, but you can ask a lot of questions that are going to let you lean one way or another. But those are all questions you should ask, right? Because if you don't ask them, then you're just swimming in a sea of paper. and some of that sea of paper will say one thing and some will say another, and you'll have no way to know underlying motives or how to rank things as being more or less truthful. The only way to sift through a sea of correspondence is to really begin to put yourself in that moment of writing and try to understand why that person at that moment sat down to use something that was expensive, paper, and something that was expensive, ink, to say something to someone else. Obviously, that relates to today because, boy, are we living in a moment when you need to ask yourself the underlying meaning, the truth and sincerity or total manipulative purpose of anything that a politician says, on all sides. And I know, particularly given social media, I know that in a sense, the first thing you have to ask, or certainly the first thing I ask often is, as I've taught you to do again and again and again, okay, so why is he saying this? Which assumes it really might not be sincere. There's a purpose. Now, it might have some sincerity to it, but still, there's a purpose. In politics, if a politician is saying something publicly or sending a letter to someone prominent and isn't, how do I want to put this? It isn't like confidential and being snuck around, or and nowadays, if a person is emailing something or saying something over the phone, right, that didn't exist in my time period, again, it matters how news is being transmitted. But in one way or another, still, there are going to be things that one politician says to another that are real, things that a politician says to another that are real and we would never know, or are real and they're intended to be real. And then a lot of things that they say to each other that have layers upon layers and meanings upon meanings, and that have all kinds of strategy and tactics behind them, and that you have to delve into to figure out. So my student's question about sincerity or manipulation kind of says something fundamental about politics, particularly a democratic politics, in which public opinion is so important. So however information ultimately makes its way to the public can have a huge impact. In this time period, a letter that I found from the late 1790s, there's a letter that Hamilton wrote explaining something that happened that would make defending what Federalists did was going to make Republicans look bad. And Hamilton wrote this letter to two Federalist friends, wrote it out, and then underlined the sentences that they were free to leak. Had it delivered from one person to them, right? Did not drop this in the mail, and was like, didn't sign it. Often if these guys were passing along important information, they didn't put their name on the document. Jefferson did that all the time. I do not sign this as I am familiar to you. But in this case, Hamilton, ever blunt, underlines, right? He's like, you can leak these parts of the letter, which now we know. At any rate, then, now, forever, politics is a blend of sincerity and manipulation, and that's on paper. That's a truth that we're living in an extreme version of now, but it's a useful one to remember when you're trying to evaluate the news that's passing before your eyes. I think that's the end of my last of my three whys is that. And I didn't do who or where for no reason at all. I said, I like the idea of the W's. I came up with, I didn't look up any of these documents beforehand. They stuck in my head, which is why I'm talking to you about them, because they are moments when I was like, oh. So at any rate, however, I'm not going to forget this time.
Good.
Yeah. Of course, it's going to be really boring because Matt and I are doing this in a string. We did 3 substitute episodes, one after another. So I'm using the same damn mug. But still, the reality mug, the mug that I did not choose, but for a sincere reason, to drink coffee.
There you go.
How's that for linking what I'm doing to the subject at hand? It is the most sincere of mugs, a non-manipulative mug. And then Matt has chosen a background.
Our background, which again, not going to reveal. It's very tricky this time around. I'm sure many of you will struggle with this one, but please do tweet it out if you do know it, and just know that this is my hint, because obviously this is a super, super hard one, which took Joanne all of 30 seconds. No, not even, like 3.5 seconds to.
And I am not the most hip popular culture person there is. So Matt has been deciding his background, and if I can guess it really quickly, I'm like, look at me, I know it. And what that really means is everyone and their brother knows this. It's the most obvious thing.
It's all about fun, but one of the better politically active shows throughout the last, I don't know, 30 some years. So.
That is very true.
Yeah.
See, there is a connection.
Yeah, see,
Excellent.
I'm trying just a little bit.
Well, look at it. I mean, we're trying for you guys, you know,
Yeah.
in this absentee session that we're having. Okay, so if you are watching this episode, it means that next week, Matt and I will be back with a new live episode, super powered, as we've said twice before, with lots more to say, lots more to involve us with, many more questions to ask. I hope you will come back. I hope you will bring your friends and family as ever. It will eternally be important in protecting our democracy to have these kinds of conversations. And this community is a great place to start. And Newbie is peeping. I don't know if you can hear that, but it like my heart sings. It's like the little peeps. They're peeping. Okay. Then he does. When I look at him, he instantly stops. Like that frog in the Bugs Bunny cartoon that sings and dances. And
Yep.
looks at him, and that's Newbie. At any rate, I hope you guys will have a good week. I will see you in a week. And I hope your August has been going swimmingly.
Absolutely.
Oh, and thank you, Matt, for coming to this substitute episode.
This is, I mean, it's fun. I enjoy your company. I love learning from you, and
this is the best.
It really is. This is fantastic. So thank you.
So,
and thanks everybody, and we'll see you live and in person next week. Wearing hopefully different clothes.
Yes. Didn't think about that.
And
truth and
I'll have a haircut. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Anyway, see you guys soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.